Hello and happy December 10. Our story tonight is called Setting the Stage for Grace. Free? The sign announced that all the Christmas trees were free, no strings attached. We could choose any of them, from the smallest scraggly spruce to the largest noble fir. Such luxury. I stretched my coat around my very pregnant belly and surveyed the lot, then looked at Andy with wide eyes. This scene was entirely different from the one several months prior. We hadn't exactly felt rich and carefree then. You're pregnant? Seriously? Seriously, I beamed. He beamed. The sun beamed. It wasn't ideal, though. We had been married 4 years at that point. And although we were happy together and ready to start a family, we were most definitely not in a good place to have a baby. Our place, in fact, was probably not even legal to rent. As a way to save money, we had moved into a ramshackle house that was condemned and going to be torn down to make way for a dentist's office parking lot. We affectionately called our little abode the Love Shack in hopes of somehow making it more charming. Drafty and drab, our home's most prominent features were the dark wood paneling and gold shag carpet, remnants of the 1970s. We drew a dartboard with a black Sharpie marker on the living room wall for our after-dinner entertainment. In the middle of the bathroom floor, there was a large circle with an X through it and the words, "Do not step here," also drawn with a Sharpie, to mark the sinkhole under the linoleum. The bathroom's plumbing included a 5-gallon bucket under the sink that we dumped out the back door after every few hand washings and toothbrushings. The tiny pot-bellied stove in the living room held barely enough wood to last 2 hours, so on winter mornings we would play rock, paper, scissors to see who would venture out of bed into the frosty air to make the fire. Rodents ran rampant through the house each night, to the point that Andy was once bitten on the ear while we slept in bed. Promptly a fair amount of bleeding, a tetanus shot, and an unfortunate nickname, Cheddar Boy. It was not a pleasant living situation, but the rent was cheap, and we were adventurous. Excuse her. Going from a family of 2 to a family of 3 changed things, however. I am not bringing a baby into this house, and you could see my jaw was set. The beaming stopped and the countdown began. We needed to find another affordable place to live, one better suited to life with a newborn, and we needed it soon. We didn't have enough money to pay the traditional first and last month's rent plus security deposit, so we needed to find another non-traditional solution. What we found was less than ideal but financially appealing. An acquaintance had bought a dilapidated fixer-upper outside of town, previously occupied by a cat hoarder, and offered my husband, carpenter, a trade, our labor to make it into a decent home in exchange for future rent. The house was in rough shape, even worse than the cold, weak-floored, plumbing-challenged rodent residence we still lived in. But Andy dove into the project with his usual optimism. As both the leaves and the mercury dropped, though, worry set in. The project proceeded much slower than originally anticipated. Floor joists were rotted. The chimney had pulled away by a fraction of an inch over the years. More rot. Progress frequently shifted into reverse. Andy tried to keep up a brave front, but he was exhausted, working his regular job, plus trying to fix up this house for the soon-to-be 3 of us. I didn't wish to add to his stress, but by early December, I began to panic. The baby was due at the first of the year. How close are we to moving in? Well, there is still a lot to do. The drywall. Can you get us reliable heat and hot water? Well, sure, I probably could, but if we have heat and hot water, we can move in. It's not going to be we need to move in. We scheduled our moving day for December 26th, a week before my due date. Andy continued to work long hours at the new house to finally get it minimally functional, while my enormous belly and I packed boxes and prepared for the baby's arrival, repainting used furniture and gathering hand-me-down baby clothes. Halfway through the month, the church called. They were planning the Christmas Eve service and wondered if Andy would be available to perform a theatrical monologue, another of his talents. Preposterous! He was already too busy. We definitely did not have time for this. I dismissed the request. He wanted to see the script. I rolled my eyes and threw up my hands. It was a piece from the perspective of Joseph, a carpenter, stressed and overwhelmed with Mary about to give birth, discouraged from working so hard but still feeling inadequate, unable to provide even the most basic place for the baby to be born. Oh, Andy needed to do this one. He would somehow find a way to memorize a lengthy monologue and be ready to perform it on Christmas Eve, even in the midst of our craziness. No thought was given to our own Christmas celebration. We had some extended family close by, and they were aware of our situation. They had come out to see the new place once, understood our timeline for moving, and were excited about the baby's arrival. Surely they would invite us to join them for Christmas. With only a couple of days remaining, I packed up our entire kitchen except for some paper goods. We could survive off the leftovers in the refrigerator and things that require no cooking. The invitation to share Christmas dinner hadn't come yet, but I was confident it would. Christmas Eve. Still no invitation. The carpenter and I were exhausted and suddenly felt very alone. The time was drawing near for the baby to be born. We were without a decent place to live, and there was no one willing to take us in. That night, Andy took the stage and performed his monologue for the Christmas Eve service, while Joseph the carpenter, Andy's character under the hot spotlight, broke down in frustration, so tired and discouraged. I stood in the back of the auditorium weeping quietly, hugging my pregnant belly. No one else understood how deeply personal that performance was for us. Christmas morning, we awoke to an icy cold house as usual. Andy made a fire and then crawled back into bed to snuggle while the house warmed up. Eventually, we got up and ate Cheerios out of paper bowls. We opened the gifts that had arrived in the mail and called our parents on the phone to thank them and say Merry Christmas. We weren't moving until the next day, and Andy had promised that we would take the whole day off for Christmas, assuming we would have plans. So once the phone calls were made, that was it. There was nothing else to do. It was just us and our moving boxes and the last of the firewood piled by the little stove. We looked around our ugly little house and began to giggle. This was one for the record books, the most pathetic Christmas celebration either of us had ever known. No family, no food, no decorations, no activities, nothing. The giggles erupted into laughter, and we held each other in the big belly between us and laughed until tears leaked from our eyes. The empty day ahead suddenly seemed cavernous. Nothing was open. We didn't own a TV. The games and books were all packed away. Let's go for a walk, Andy suggested. It's cold, I protested. We can bundle up. But my coat barely fits around me anymore. We will have to walk fast then to get warm. I waddle. The area around the Love Shack had no sidewalks, but there was a grocery store with an enormous parking lot directly across the street. It was closed for the holiday, deserted, a fine place to stretch our legs. The picked-over Christmas tree display was still there, perhaps for extreme procrastinators, we chuckled, but we noted that the attendant's RV was gone, and as we got closer, we noticed a hand-scrawled sign. The remaining trees were free. Free! We laughed at the irony. The year we couldn't decorate, couldn't have afforded a nice tree even if we could decorate, and now we could have our choice of the biggest and best trees on the lot. It was time to go tree shopping. Without another person or car in sight, we wandered the rows alone, standing up each tree and examining it from all sides before shaking our heads and moving on to the next one. Narrowing down our choices to just a few, we stood them up again, debating the merits of each one. When we were satisfied we had found the very best tree in the grocery parking lot that bleak midwinter day, we sighed, then addressed our tree. You are a good little tree. You are the best tree on the whole lot. We choose you. We gently laid the tree back down on the cold pavement, stroked its branches one more time, straightened back up, and reached for each other's hand. Treeless, but all smiles, we strolled and waddled back to the Love Shack. 25 years later, we still refer to that little tree as our favorite, the best Christmas tree we never had. We had barely made it back into the house and stoked the fire when the phone rang. Since Christmas Day calls were usually whole family events, I held the receiver out so both of us could hear. It was friends from church, new friends whom we didn't know very well yet, with 2 kids, a golden retriever, and a big fancy house that overlooked a park with a gazebo. Quite the antithesis of us and our little shack across from the grocery store. We glanced at each other across the receiver. They were thinking about us being 9 months pregnant and in the middle of a move, and were just calling to see if we didn't already have other plans. Would we like to come over for dinner that evening? There was no need to bring anything, just come. We again looked up across the receiver, eyes wide, and shrugged, goofy smiles spreading across our faces. Several other stragglers from assorted highways and byways joined us at the table that evening. We were a mismatched bunch for sure, but it was an elegant and glorious feast. Truly love incarnate. As the evening went on, animated stories and boisterous laughter swirled together with the aromas of the sumptuous meal and a tall evergreen tree, our faces illumined with twinkling lights and candles, the reflection warm and glowing in the window panes. In the midst of our cold, dreary, and messy lives, we were bound together that night by bountiful grace and generosity. My husband and I had nothing to bring, nothing to contribute, but the grace came down anyway, exactly when we needed it most, precisely when we least expected it. It was definitely not a silent night, but it was indeed a holy night. Ah, that is the best. I hope you have a good evening, and I'll have another story for you tomorrow night.